This is Judge Joe Brown, and you're watching We All Be News TV, the
News-free Dixie.
news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
We all be. It's an honor once again to have on the one and only Judge Joe Brown. Today's date is April the 6th, 2017. About 2 days ago, Memphis and the nation the world actually observed the 49th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis. And that has actually kicked out a year-long celebration. I don't know, I guess it's a celebration or remembering of what happened that day and how it shook the world and its legacy. How are you doing today, sir?
All right. Judge is back in the house.
Judge back in the house. But also, you played a pivotal role in the, I guess, the latest narrative of this story about what happened to Dr. King. Like, you was actually involved in this case some type of way, correct?
Yeah, I was the last judge to hear one of Ray's appeals. He died on me, and his lawyer died on me. One of his lawyers died on me. So that made it moot. It was hanging in limbo. The state of Tennessee wasn't too anxious to get to the bottom of the matter. And for that matter, neither are the people. They like to celebrate it, but what's the point if you don't learn from it? Nice holiday. They murdered the man, but they don't have the brought to justice. I doubt if they ever will, but at least they could learn what happened, because now they're so trusting under Homeland Security / Patriot Act that they don't get it anymore. Congress got appalled at what the FBI and others were up to, and they put some restraints on what they could lawfully engage in. These things had not been lawful before, but they had been done. And now they have removed those constraints with the Homeland Patriot Act / Homeland Security / Patriot Act. So it's okay to do it again. And you don't put your trust in Big Brother. It's not a good idea. Ray didn't kill him. The Memphis Police Department concluded long ago that Ray didn't kill him, and also he wasn't even in town on the day he died. King died. But that didn't stop anybody. The district attorney's office was not interested in getting to the bottom of it. The current one certainly isn't. It's been the enemy of the people in this area and the main tool of our oppression around here. So when they decided to take one of us out, they got away with it with impunity. They've been doing it all around the country.
So what about the civil trial that proved that ended on December 1999 that the jury found the government was complicit in the assassination of Dr. King in Memphis, a civil court in Memphis?
Yeah, that was in front of the late Honorable James Swearington. Circuit Court. I testified as a ballistics expert in that.
And you actually used the gun or tested the gun that they say James Ray used?
Yeah, I had it tested. The very first judge, the late Honorable Preston Battle, ordered the rifle retested. He said that the ballistics tests they had done before were fake. Same conclusion I had. I never did get a chance to issue an ultimate finding, but that would have been one of them. The FBI simply faked them. So
my thing is this, though. I'm going to ask you this. Like, when James Ray had a history of being this really a screw-up criminal. Like, he'll rob a store and get caught within hours or less than an hour. So how was this guy able to escape from a federal penitentiary in Missouri and be on the run for almost 3 years and get caught in London, the Heathrow Airport, without any type of help?
He didn't get caught. He caught himself. He didn't know things that should have gone along with the holder of a Canadian passport. He also had 3 English passports in his possession, too.
So he was that incompetent, and we are led to believe that he did this on his own with Dr. King.
What Ray was one of perhaps 4, maybe 5 alternative scapegoats.
Okay.
The weapon that was used to shoot King is not that Remington 760 Game Master that the Civil Rights Museum stupidly jumped upon so they could have a piece of history, which was nothing but a little amateurish, ridiculous call. What King got shot with was an XM-21 7.62 by 51 NATO caliber. It had a psionic suppressor on it. It was a rebuilt M14 with, interestingly enough, a special stainless steel barrel that had a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 11 1/4 inches. The Army had produced maybe 62, 63 of these barrels at the Army Marksmanship Unit, and the Navy, Marine Corps, and Army wanted those things from Vietnam, yet the FBI requisitioned 5. There was a big furor over that. The inventory, well, the invoice shows they got 5 of them in late December 1967, and in April 1968, they claimed they could only find 4 on their inventory, one of them having disappeared. That was the one that they shot King with. It had special supersonic subsonic ammunition that it used, and that was to keep down the sound signature. The shot was not from the flop house. It was not from the bushes. It was from the fire station dormitory. Right dead across the street. The weapon was left in the fire station and was removed several hours later by officials.
So at that fire station that day, they had, 2 firemen at the fire station, Officer Ed Reddick as well?
Reddick was not the fireman. Officer Reddick was a police officer. Reddick refused to leave. The official story is different, but his personal story is that they sent 10 cops and 2 squad cars. They hog-tied him with a rope, double handcuffed him, and threw him in the back seat of a squad car and removed him when he refused to leave.
Leave the fire station, right?
What's that?
Leave the fire station. He refused to leave the fire station.
No, it wasn't a fire station. He was at King's side. Reddick was a cop.
Okay.
There's some confusion. There was 1 black fireman. They advised him that his son had been critically injured in an accident. He rushed around and finally discovered nothing had happened to his son, was told to stay gone and come back in a couple of days, take the day off. Rest of the day off.
See, I also heard a story about Reddit. I interviewed Reddit a couple of years ago before he passed. And I also heard a couple of stories. He said they had a contract on his life or something like that. They told him that.
Oh, well, I wouldn't be surprised. He actually refused to leave. There was a crew of black sergeants and detectives acting as the personal bodyguard for King.
Right.
They refused to leave his side, but MPD told them that they had to come to a meeting downtown or they would be suspended because there was a threat against their lives. Well, Reddick stayed anyway, and they wound up basically sick 10 cops on him. There were 2 squad cars, 5 in each, came down and hog-tied him, threw him in the back of one, and removed him. At that point, the okay is given. It's for King to go on and go over to Billy Kyle's, or Reverend Kyle's house for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
He was headed out of the east side of the Lorraine Motel. A certain individual I won't identify at this point in time because we're still working on it, came and got him and said, Reverend, some of your fans are awaiting you out in the pool. They'd like to see you before you leave. And that's when he stepped out, wound up getting himself shot. It wasn't Jesse Jackson, by the way.
Well, I know you said. Well, what about people talk about how Jesse Jackson was involved in the removal of the Memphis invaders from Lorraine Motel? What about that?
He had nothing to do with it. He had nothing to do with it. I briefed some of the then extant civil rights leaders on this, and I found there were 2 distinct responses worded almost exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was, we've got to get to the bottom of this.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, and this is the interesting thing, is it's a direct quote from every one of them involved who was a suspect at the time as being in collaboration with the authorities was, we need to let sleeping dogs lie. Now, Jesse Jackson and Reverend Lowry were in the category of, we need to get to the bottom of it, whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, my thing
right.
with Billy Cowles, though, he did the documentary Witness Room 306. It conflicts with Ralph Abernathy's autobiography of what actually happened that last hour of King's life.
Reverend Cowles was one that got for King and brought him back from the other side of the hotel to go out by the pool, and he's the one that ducks back in. He said, well, I just ducked it back so in case something happened. Yeah.
Right. It also is ironic that he dies, I believe, on Coretta Scott King's birthday.
I don't. He'd been sick for a while.
The only thing, like, it's interesting, like, it's kind of, I don't know. But I'm saying, like, that should be, because he was cross-examined during a civil trial, correct? He was cross-examined back in 99?
I was not physically present when that happened.
Well, I believe I read it in the Active State, Dr. William Pepper's book, but the transcripts, they showed he was cross-examined, that, you know, there was some issues with that. But my thing is that I think it's fascinating because, like, a lot of this stuff is not being talked about. Like, people assume that Dr. King would normally stay at the Lorraine Motel, which was not the case. He would stay at the Holiday Inn Rivermont.
He was not supposed to stay at the Lorraine Motel.
Right.
He was doing what civil rights leaders do, and that's integrate.
Mm-hmm.
The Rivermont was the flagship hotel for the Holiday Inn, which was at that point headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee. That's where Holiday Inn originated.
That's right.
In Memphis.
Yes, sir.
And over a lot of protest, he was brought, to some people's surprise, to the Lorraine Motel. I think they had surveyed the Lorraine Motel because they were able to come up with a topographical table map within one day after the assassination. And that usually takes a little while for a bunch of lieutenants and sergeants to put together.
Mm-hmm.
So they already apparently had it. It was a two-man hit team. One was a spotter, one was a shooter. Those windows across the street from the firehouse, across the street in the firehouse, slid slightly. They were slid slightly open. The shot was from inside. Nobody was hanging out the window. Captain Tommy Smith, who retired as head of homicide and was the first detective there on the scene 10, 15 minutes after the shooting, gave a statement that when he looked out of the bathroom window in the flop house where he was directed, he discovered there was a thick limb growing diagonally across the window, and you couldn't even see the Lorraine Motel.
Mm-hmm.
And upon his return, about an hour later, with crime scene, that the limb and the tree had been cut down.
Mm.
So his conclusion was there's no way in the devil Ray could have shot him from that window. The two eyewitnesses the state has affidavits from, some guy and this woman that were in the flop house, Captain Smith says they were so drunk that he could not revive them, and he had to call 911, and they had, for ordinary people, fatal doses of alcohol in their system. They were alcoholics, and he had talked with a taxi driver who had been there 15 minutes before the shooting and found them in the same condition. So it was his conclusion they were in no shape to have seen James or Ray or anybody else there. He also says he had gone outside of the flop house, gone back in, returned, and found the rifle that's now in the Civil Rights Museum and a radio with a brass plaque on it with Ray's prison number and name neatly stacked up outside of the flop house on the sidewalk, and all of that between his leaving and returning. So that recording of a so-called police chase of Ray's white Mustang on I-40 is acknowledged to have been bogus, and the Homicide Bureau of the Memphis Police Department discovered he was not even present in the area at the time. It was a two-man team now.
Mm-hmm.
The fire marshal at the station says 2 federal people came 2 days before the killing and went up on the roof of the fire station and then up to the top of the tower. He says they never went back up to the tower. And that's the statement you get in the so-called documentary that they did on it on television before the 50th anniversary. And essentially, no, the 40th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, you don't get any investigation of that. And the state was against me having the rifle tested. They filed a document that said, quote, if the rifle is tested now, it may damage it and prevent it from being retested in the future, unquote. Now, what the devil does that mean?
Mm.
And too many of the people involved in the appellate process on that case up to the Court of Criminal Appeals and in the prosecutor's office had people who were relatives that were involved in the initial case one way or the other.
Wow. Also, you get back to the flop house. I know it was one woman named I think Gracie Stevens. Her husband was a drunk, and he said that he saw Ray, but she said she didn't see no James or Ray.
Yeah, well, Captain Tommy Smith investigated all of that, found nobody had.
Mm-hmm.
There were other people who were alternative scapegoats. Now, this interesting thing, too,
mm-hmm.
about the escape. I actually did a foreword for a book written by Ray's brother.
Okay.
On the subject. And Ray supposedly escapes by hiding in the bread truck at the penitentiary that he was confined in.
Mm-hmm.
They made the bread for that penitentiary and a number of other penitentiaries, so he supposedly hides under the loaves of bread in one of the trucks that is responsible for delivering the fresh bread. So just imagine under those circumstances that one of his priorities is to return to his cell and take his radio.
Mm.
You see, that doesn't make any sense at all. The other interesting thing that is discoverable from all of the evidence is within 48 hours of him escaping, they removed the escape bulletin from the wire.
Mm. Oh, that's interesting.
The thing about the passports that I found interesting is that one of them that he was using was of a Canadian citizen who was a real person and alive.
Mm-hmm.
The other 3 were Englishmen who were real people, but they were all dead. All 3 of them were born on the same date as Ray. They had the same general description. 2 of them had never been reported as having been deceased. One of them had been reported as deceased, but the records had been removed from the equivalent of the English Department of Vital Records. That seems a little bit above and beyond James Earl Ray's capacity.
Yeah, especially if he's that.
A little too much James Bond, I Spy types.
Yeah, he's too incompetent as a criminal. This is a low-level criminal. He's not that competent. So I just doubt that he had that type of mastermind mentality or that ability. But also, the red flag, too. I don't know your take on this. The fact that I talked to Captain Jerry Williams, too, one of the people that used to be on King's security detail, Captain Jerry Williams. I talked to him a couple of years ago, too.
Yes.
And he said really the mentality changed once there was, like, the Frank Holloman guy, the guy who controlled the police and fire departments. He served under J. Edgar Hoover for 25 years. He was J. Edgar Hoover's number 3 man. Is that suspicious?
Yeah.
that he be in place when King comes here to
Well, it's
control the
more
fire
than
police
that.
department?
There's never been an escape from Ray's Penitentiary in the time that it has existed
Mm-hmm.
until Ray, and then the person that had become warden was also one of Hoover's assistants, long-term
I didn't know.
assistants.
Wow. This is crazy. Can we just say the FBI killed Dr. King? Can we just say the FBI killed him?
Hold on. You see, you also had Claude Armour here in Memphis, who had been fire commissioner and director of police.
Okay.
Jointly at one time, had also been a long-term assistant of J. Edgar Hoover.
Oh, man. This is crazy. So what does it say to you? I mean, what does it, a normal thinking person can look at this and say what? Or should think about?
Typical of what happened in the 60s. See, the operative phrase that goes on in those circles at that time is, one, you know, on a need-to-know basis, and two, by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this thing about, remember, the Red Scare and all of that stupid nonsense.
Right.
Most ridiculous infringement on American rights you can think of. They made it a crime to belong to certain organizations or to support or advocate. You know, that's all First Amendment stuff. They were so freaked out about it. And the internal memoranda from the FBI that were secured revealed that the FBI had two thoughts about humor. They didn't care about civil rights anymore. They always looked at that as a middle-class, feel-good phenomenon that wasn't going to do much of anything, and they thought the civil rights movement was communist led and inspired anyway, and most black churches were supposed to be fronts for communist institutions. But what they were worried about is this is 1968. You had the Tet Offensive that comes in, and that was designed not to capture territory, but simply for the strategic purpose of showing the American public that the news media and the military and the Pentagon, the White House, etc., had lied to them. And in that it was very successful, and they were very worried about revitalization of the labor movement. So they were looking at King as being someone to galvanize the anti-war movement, as he had done with the civil rights movement, and someone that would revitalize labor activity, as was the reason he was here. That was support the sanitation workers. You had characters like this late clown, Kenneth Turner, down at juvenile court that had attempted to threaten the parents with being locked up if they let their children participate in the boycott and things like that. So you had a vested interest going around in Memphis to keep King out of here. Now, there was a three-way struggle. There were those who wanted King here within the rights movement, or those who were being active in supporting the sanitation workers. There were those who said, we don't need him, we can do it ourselves, and he's passe. And then there were those whose white masters had told them to keep King out. Now, one of the things that was going on then, as is now, is too many of the so-called black leaders have been compromised by taking, say, money under the table, you know, being too much house Negro types who had been doing what they could to diffuse black voting, or were homosexuals, and that was known to J. Edgar Hoover and his boys, or had strange sexual rights that they engaged in, and or activities, and that was being held against them. Interestingly enough, we came across a personal order signed by J. Edgar Hoover that called off the audio and visual surveillance of King for the 48-hour period before his assassination, when there had been that in place for years beforehand.
Your thoughts about the narrative that they're now saying that Dr. King was suffocated at St. Joseph's that he actually did not die on the balcony.
No, oh no.
You don't buy that?
No. The bullet goes in his right upper cheek at an angle going from forward to down, from the right side to left. Takes out molars, rips up his tongue, goes out between his lower jaws, leaves the body. It hits him right where the clavicle is, ricochets under the skin, goes around and nicks the carotid artery. He's going to bleed out on that. You can't do anything with that one.
Okay.
The body's going to try to pump more blood in the other carotid artery, but wind up pumping more out of that wound. So it travels over his back, under the skin, over the right scapula, going from right to left, from top to bottom. And it lodges on his left side between the left scapula and the back skin. The bullet never penetrates the thorax. So you cut somebody's jugular vein, that's one thing. You cut their carotid artery, they're done.
Okay. So, that's the thing. That's came out the Dr. William Pepper book, and people been talking about since this past summer that he might have been suffocated at the hospital. He could have survived the shot and been paralyzed.
Oh, no. He wouldn't have been paralyzed. It didn't hit the central nervous system. If it hadn't clipped the carotid artery, he might have survived, but he wouldn't have been able to talk too well.
But can we trust the autopsy report? That's what I'm saying. If people are in this conspiracy to this level, can we trust the actual forensics and the official autopsy report on this?
I saw the pictures of the body.
Okay.
It clipped the carotid artery.
Do you think they could have manipulated that after he was dead?
No, that would kill you.
Okay. I don't want to be putting it out there because it's hard to trust these folks that with this narrative of Dr. King, and now we know that the government was involved. You got the paper trail with the memos and whatnot.
This is what's happening. If you shoot somebody with 308, 7.62 NATO, 30-06, with an expanding bullet, and you get a good solid torso hit, they could be standing next to the emergency room, and that's non-survivor.
Yes, sir.
They're dead. So they shoot him with a 162 grain expanding 30 caliber bullet, but they don't take a chest shot. That's because energy equals mass times velocity squared. That's Einstein's thing.
Yes, sir.
So they've slowed this bullet down so it is not supersonic. It's going 1,100 feet per second. That makes it a 30 caliber pistol, not a 30 caliber rifle. So that's why they take a head shot and they almost miss it.
Wow.
See, that was about the perfect shot. And see, the other thing is it clips the carotid artery, but the bullet doesn't break the skin again because it's kept under flex. And that's not uncommon for somebody to be shot straight on the front. The bullet penetrates the skin, hits the rib, ricochets around the rib, all the way around the side, like in a half circle, and then come out the back. And it looks like the person got shot straight through when they didn't.
Now, American history and these bullets, boy, I tell you.
Or get hit in the forehead at a slight angle. The bullet travels under the skin around the skull and then comes out the backside. It looks like when it leaves the skin back there, it looks like he got shot straight through the head, but he didn't get a bullet through the skull. It hit the skull and went around it under the skin.
Okay.
So, the dude's fucked up. Like the famous, they stories like, dude's fucked up, man, get blast right. The hell you are. I'm still, wait a minute, is that you? Yeah, it's me, dog. You're not fucked up? No, man. Well, you got shot straight through the head. I did. My head hurts, but it doesn't feel like I got shot through the head. And then they checked. It didn't penetrate the skull.
Wow. And what's your take on like they trying to say there was a Memphis police officer that fired that shot? I think his name was Earl Clark.
It was not a Memphis police officer, unless that was just an accident. It looked like, and this is where you may have got where some of that conspiracy stuff gets confused.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that were getting trained in this stuff back then, and they didn't quite know what to do with it. Those people they put in the state National Guards, and that's because they'd been trained to snipe, and they'd had a little practice in the early 60s over in the Nam shooting film. It was a two-man team, a spotter and a shooter.
Mm-hmm.
What that works is you have an anticipated target area, and you move the sliding glass aside. You don't hang out the rifle barrel out the window.
Right.
You're on something more solid, 15 feet inside. So all you can see directly is through that little narrow slot.
Right.
So your spotter watches to see when the target approaches. He says, "Target in view." Shooter says, "I have it." And then the spotter says, "Send it." The gunman squeezes the trigger. The rifle is on sandbags or something to stabilize it, so all he's got to do is get out and make the final sight adjustments. Bam, he's dead. Sounds attenuated. It comes out the side door of the fire station. That's why people think the sound was coming from those bushes, because that's why the weapon was set up like it was, to attenuate the sound. If somebody shoots at you in a forest, the bullet, ordinarily a rifle bullet, is going supersonic, and it leaves a little minor shock waves. Every time it passes a tree, it goes crack. So you can see hear the echo, crack, 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 crack. Oh, it's over there. So the whole idea was to throw that off so it didn't leave the crack.
Wow. Well, thank you, Judge. I appreciate it. Wow.
No, they didn't need to suffocate him. They fucked him up.
You ain't gonna get this on the local news either, people. They sure wasn't telling none of this on local news the other day. They ain't gonna share it, man.
It got his ass good.
I mean, actually, this too. I mean, something I came across in my research. The fact that you had a high-level military intelligence operational unit in Memphis from March 28th of 1968 to April 12th. What's your take?
It wasn't so much a high-level military intelligence operation as this.
Mm-hmm.
They had been training some people in certain things in the military, and they didn't know what to do with them once they got out. And there were some state National Guard operations out of Mississippi, Arkansas, and Tennessee that had gotten to be questionable in their membership with too many whites' rights type. And they had too much access to too many armories and too many interesting pieces of military hardware were getting taken. Now, what looks like happened was that you had some professionals acting in an official maverick capacity, that is, officially unofficial. And that was known to a number of other individuals. There were quite a few memoranda that came into the light of day through the Freedom of Information Act that showed the FBI was discussing actively whether or not King would be more dangerous as a dead martyr or as a live labor anti-war leader. / anti-war leader. You see, those kind of things were in discussion. At that point, you had a decade that had transitioned from so-called peaceful civil rights, which wasn't much of a struggle. As one white gentleman put it to me one time, said, Lawyer Brown is not much of a struggle if you're down on your knees getting your head beat by some redneck until he feels guilty about whipping your behind. That's not much of a struggle. That's getting your butt beat. Actually, he says that's getting your ass whipped.
Right.
That had morphed into somebody that really scared the devil out of people and who had become more of a viable leader for the up-and-coming militancy of the time, and that was Malcolm X. And then you got H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, Eldridge Cleaver, the ideation of Huey P. Newton, and these guys were the antithesis of peaceful, church-going, chicken-eating types with suits and ties on, holding arms and singing "We Shall Overcome," while racists beat them across the head and they got washed down with water hoses.
Right.
See, they were going out ambushing cops and assassinating cops. They were standing up with guns. They were marching through the state capitol in Sacramento, California, with shotguns at high port. You know, that's not what's supposed to happen. That impetus got kicked off by the Deacons for Defense and Justice in Louds County.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the guys who popularized the Black Panther concept. That got taken over out in California, and two different locales out there which had two different flavors, in Los Angeles and in the Bay Area, and then there was another locus of this in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Each of them had their own flavor and different objectives. So it was a thing that was going on. You had black student unions taking over buildings on campuses and marching around with guns. You had SDS, that's basically white kids, Students for Democratic Society, protesting the war. You had that thing that ultimately happened in 1968 with the police riots in Chicago at the Democratic Convention. You had a great upheaval. You had Lyndon Baines Johnson openly saying, I have divided the country, therefore I will not seek nor accept the nomination of my party for another term as president. And quite frankly, I think Oprah did the country a grave disservice with that nonsense she had in Selma, the way they portrayed LBJ. LBJ was probably one of the most ruthless, unprincipled people in American politics. The first and only person to ever strong-arm run the U.S. Senate. But once he achieved the ultimate power of the presidency, he probably became the most principled of presidents. Most people don't know this, but he withdrew Kennedy's civil rights bill as being entirely too weak and substituted one as a military bill, which is the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that passed. He was brilliant in how he strategized it and what he did to get his former redneck constituents and fellow legislators to go along with it. Absolutely brilliant. He gave a speech shortly after he became president. People were scared, sounded like you hear all this hysteria about Trump these days. You heard it about LBJ, and he said basically when he represented a small district in Texas, he would be what could be described as a classical racist. Then when he became state senator from Texas, he had a bigger constituency. He represented them well, but still a racist. When he became vice president, he had much not much to do, but as the new president, he represented all of the people, and there was going to be some changes. And he did. Probably there hasn't been a president before or since, other than perhaps inadvertently Lincoln made, to a slightly, well, to a somewhat different and lesser extent, FDR. And certainly there's been nobody since who did as much for black people as LBJ. He was way in over his head on the war thing and listened to some generals who gave him some very bad advice about Vietnam. They were trying to fight World War II when something totally different was going on.
Well, one general that did give him some good advice was MacArthur, though. The one general of all generals, Douglas MacArthur.
Oh, MacArthur.
Yeah, he came around. Yeah.
But he didn't give LBJ any advice. LBJ, interestingly enough, regularly called former President Eisenhower former General Eisenhower, as had Kennedy. Now, the Democratic Party at that point was not very versed in the ins and outs of militaria and that kind of international politics. And to a great extent, that was due to the Kennedy thing. They wanted youthful exuberance in the White House. They got it. And if you've ever listened to some of those guys interviewed before they died much later in life, they said they scared the devil out of themselves because they didn't know what they were doing. That whole thing about the Cuban Missile Crisis was not brilliance pulled off by Kennedy, but Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, had been brilliant and gave JFK his saving face out of, say, you made us blink, we don't have a free press, don't have to worry about it. So the ultimate aim that the Russians got was to get the intermediate range missiles out of Turkey and away from their throats. And they achieved their objective. We had none. Not a clue.
Now, I want to get back to,
nor a clue.
Yes, sir. But I want to get back to, the King thing, because I brought up March 28th when the military folks came into Memphis, and they left April 12th. But also on March 28th, there was Dr. King's last march that he led, which became a disaster for him because it was disrupted.
Yeah, it was. But see, that military thing, I think that's just another one of these conspiracy theories. They really didn't have much to do with anything. One of the things that's going badly is like the weapons. They really wanted those 5 weapons that the FBI got. They only made 63 of them. And they wanted the things for sniping in Vietnam, which was a new thing to try and interdict the Ho Chi Minh Trail and do a psych job on the Viet Cong and the NVA. They didn't pull it off, but they desperately wanted all of those weapons for LERPs, Green Beret stuff, the nascent military sniper that was resurfacing in the U.S. military, and for the SEALs. So here's the FBI getting 5 out of the 60-some, and like, what the devil does the FBI need them for? And that was way before they came up with the hostage rescue service. But in any event, you had enough people who had been in and out of the military that were this gung-ho type, and the attitude was displayed in, I tell you a movie where you can see it.
Okay.
He's pretty good at these things. Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry.
Right.
The name of the particular Dirty Harry one was Magnum Force.
Okay.
There is some discussion in there that is particularly like the language that kept turning up in these memos that we found from the FBI. Now, there had been a center for, as a repository for records and for review purposes on assassinations and assassination attempts. Congress had enabled it by an action, and President George Herbert Walker Bush had strengthened it with an executive order, as did Bill Clinton. And it used to be downtown on 14th Street in D.C. You could walk in, I did so, and pay your fee, and they would give you certified copies of the various documents from all of the federal agencies concerning investigations of attempted political assassinations or assassinations that were actually carried out. That thing has moved out further. Now, I think it's out in Bethesda, I'm not sure, but it's no longer located downtown on 14th Street. And it's a little bit more difficult to do the research. But you went in and you made the request, they do the research and give you the documents. And some of what they came up with was absolutely surprising, particularly these internal FBI memos discussing whether or not to kill King.
Why would they keep that stuff around? What would make you want to keep something like that around?
Because it's a bureaucracy. There's a bureaucratic mind, and see, a bureaucracy has a mind of its own. People that work there are civil servants. That's their career. That's their job. They can't be fired. You know, you get promoted on merit and taking examinations. And it's not like private enterprise where there's a whole lot of cutthroat nonsense going on.
Wow, that is bold in me. I mean, I guess they bet on people not reading this stuff or analyzing it for themselves, the public.
Oh, well, like, for example, the stuff that was in the files here, there were a couple of memos. One of them had been splashed with coffee that had been sweetened, and it was stuck to the back of some stuff. I looked at it personally.
Wow.
And it was discussing what idiot ordered the rifle to be fired down here in Memphis. And what that was all about was the day after the killing, they took this rifle, somebody down here being a busybody, took Ray's 760 Game Master, and when they shot it at 100 yards, it hit something like 6 feet to the right and 4 feet low at 100 yards. It had never even been sighted in, or vice versa. But in any event, you know, it was a disaster. And one of the things that came to mind, that comes to mind now that we're discussing it, is one set of memoranda about the rifle test. It was the director wishes to know how long these tests would take if they were conducted. And then the memo goes back, see Agent so-and-so. Agent so-and-so sends a memo back, says it would take 30 to maybe 40 days to do this. Another memo comes back, as per the director's wishes, have a ballistics report done by 2 days hence in draft form for the director to review. Please be advised that the request has been complied with by Agent so-and-so. Please review the enclosed or the attached. And then a day later, the director wishes the following changes. So in other words, 4 or 5 days, they come up with a fictitious test result that ordinarily would have taken at least a month to have done.
Wow, that's crazy. And also, I want to get your take on, like, what's your thoughts about the Memphis invaders? Like, what's your take on them? Like, were they compromised?
They had a good heart about it.
Okay.
They had a good heart about it. They were trying to help things out. You have to understand what was going on at the time. King was passe. If the FBI had left him alone, he probably would have faded as a footnote. The young people are not like today's young people. We had looked out in embarrassment. It was embarrassing to most of the young black folk who were about things in the rest of the country. White kids would come up. Oh, man, you got your dudes, got your butts kicked, man. They really jacked you up on that march, man. Oh, man, it was cold-blooded, man. Got your ass whooped, man. Oh, yeah, man, well, you want your ass whooped, man. Keep talking that smack, you know. So, like I said, we were all fired up by Malcolm. Malcolm was our guy, you know. And see, it was a different time. You let your education start lapsing, you were in the Army. And they drafted everybody they could get an excuse to draft. So you had an incentive to stay in school.
Oh, Judge,
And
let me ask you this.
people were angry, and they were tired of things. And nowadays, I get 18, 19, 20, 20-some years. Judge, what should we do? Why are you asking me, an old man, when you ought to be scaring the hell out of me with what you're attempting to do? I'm looking at you, you look like you're passing. See, we didn't play that.
Well, Judge, let me
It's a different.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's a different flavor. You go to a party now, and there's everybody from 15 to 75 trying to dance to the same music and do basically the same dances, the most current editions of which are a rehash of something that was going on in 1966, 7, 8, 9, 72. And, you know, rap groups sample on 55, 60-year-old stuff that came out of Motown or Stax, you know. The idea of my grandfather and I dancing to the same music just was, you know, it was something you just didn't conceive of. But the music hasn't changed. See? So it's like we've got a few more years before it looks like we're going to get young people worked up enough to do something. Now, what's going on with the rest of the country looks kind of like what the white people were doing 25, 30 years before the civil rights era. So they're getting angry, but their anger is directed at two things: this LGBT movement and this feminist thing that is offending a lot of traditional men and women. It just, you know, they want women to be stuff that a lot of women don't want to be. Like you talk to women about women in the military, and they, you know, like, what is wrong with these people? Why? You know, and then you look at human history, you know, like you put people, women in the front line, you know, and you don't have your back against the wall, and it's like to the last person in the village, you know, trying to stave off everything, because if you lose, they're all going to sacrifice you and rip your heart out to the sun god, you know, this kind of thing. So, I don't know. It's confusing to a lot of people, and for the first time in human history, your labor won't get you anything because industrial technology and computerization have made you obsolete.
Wow.
Those kind of things weren't staring people in the face, and young people were getting angry. They were burning stuff down. They were shooting people not for, you know, the inner city BS, but for the stuff that was being glorified at the time, you know. While everybody wants to be a revolutionary. You know, you had this thing in China, you had this example in Russia, you had what was going on in Vietnam, you had this example in Cuba. People were galvanized and they wanted to be relevant. And you had this process of the civil rights era showing people how brutal things were, and you could see the contradictions because you could look at them on TV.
Yes, sir.
But I don't know what's going on now. Everybody's so passive. I guess they get off watching the sitcom or the Comedy Zone stuff that they have where all they want to talk about is somebody's gap or the drop of a word or who's doing who rather than who's doing what.
All right.
And the country has become feminized now. It's softer, kinder, gentler, and everybody's supposed to be reasoned in what they do, and they get all upset. For example, the reaction to the Trump crowd. Oh my God, they're pull out stuff and then rude. Oh, please, give it a break. You know, and they throw the N-word around for sport now, where the use of the word was more frequent from different quarters back when, and it was like, you get your butt kicked if you say it the wrong place, wrong time. We weren't calling each other that, you know, in a nice way and getting it all thrown out on the media like, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when it got said to you by the wrong people, it's like, look out, watch your six. Something's about to go down wrong. You know, it was a pressure. Everybody's got the myth now of it's all right, just a little fine tweaking and things will be okay. Back then, you know, they had, I think I may have sent you a copy of this, that map that Sinclair Oil, the gas station chain, used to put out that a black postman had done about where it was safe to stay when you were traveling, what houses and what the addresses were. I know my old man would always buy that. We'd travel after dark, and it wasn't all of these interstate highways. It was dark, 2-lane roads, and you traveled at night because the cops weren't out. You didn't want to run into John Law or Smokey or state police, so you either stayed at a colored motel during daylight and slept then, or you pulled over in some convenient woods off the road and you slept up in the trees. And everybody carried a bedpan in the car and a water sack, canvas water bag strapped to the front bumper so it could stay cool, and you carried around your proverbial fried chicken. You liked Greyhound bus because they'd let us eat there without any hassle. Otherwise, be prepared. Somebody would go up and knock on the door of the restaurant and ask if they could eat and get told, go around the back, and you'd be handed to you out the kitchen.
Wow.
You see, serious wrong place, wrong time. You get rocks, bricks, and bullets thrown at your car with your family in there with you. You get within 15, 20 miles of your destination, you could travel in daylight. Where are you going, boy? Well, you get this car here. All nice car for a nigger to be driving. Hell, what you do, boy? Well, sir, we just going to go visit our kin. You got kin folk around here, boy? Who your kin folk? Oh, you going to see Hornberry. Yeah, them good people. Don't be too sure. God damn it, go on with it. You just go on about your business. You going to run into Trooper Jackson about 10 miles up there. You just tell him you already saw Trooper Robertson. They flag you right on by. They's good colored people. Good credit to their race. See, that's the way it used to be, man. I'd run into that growing up. You know, so quite a few times. It was humiliating, ridiculous, and it certainly wasn't safe.
Wow. So, Judge, let me ask you this, too. I know I talked to a civil rights veteran last week at a conference in Jackson, Mississippi, and he told me he's a veteran himself. He said that black men were not allowed to join the National Guard during the 60s to avoid the draft.
Exactly.
That's true. That is true.
That is true.
Wow.
And see, that's the other thing, like George Walker Bush.
There he talked about, yeah.
Joined the Texas National Guard, Air Force National Guard. He's on AWOL for 6, 7, 8, 9, almost a year, because they were having problems with people getting high, so they put in this mandatory requirement that every week these dudes had to report and give a pee test. So he couldn't pass it because he was staying high all the time. But see, that's all right. He had a drug habit till he was in his 40s, but that's youthful indiscretion and you're in your 40s. You know, it didn't fly that way with us. See, I was not a civil rights veteran. There was no way I was going to actually let somebody whip me, I'd play kamikaze.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, not me. You know, we were going to go down. They could kill me, but I was going to take somebody to Valhalla with me.
Yes, sir.
You pray to Jesus all you wanted, but Jesus wasn't going to protect me. I was going to protect myself, and I was going to do it violently and effectively.
Mm.
Even if I wasn't getting out of there, somebody was going down with me. But see, no,
I was going to ask you this. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you because when you said all that, I was thinking about, I'm still thinking about April 4th, 68, where you had, this guy who infiltrated the invaders named A.L.L. McCullough. If you look at that famous photo, he's kneeling over Dr. King, but he was undercover against police and military intelligence, then became a CIA officer. I had a chance to talk to him on the phone about 2 minutes, about 2 years ago after I came from Selma. And also you think about what happened to Malcolm X. His chief bodyguard, Eugene Roberts, was undercover NYPD for the BOSS program. And you go to Chicago with Fred Hampton Sr., the Black Panther chairman, whose chief bodyguard was William O'Neill, who was the FBI informant. So how can we just go around and act like we don't know who killed our people, our leaders? Like, it's our own government.
It is like a farce.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there was a long connection between the Jewish community and the NAACP.
Right.
The theory is that if they couldn't be allowed, if they couldn't do it to a colored man, they certainly couldn't do it to a Jew. For colored people, the interesting thing was the SPCA laws, the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animal laws. If you couldn't do it to a dog, you couldn't do it to a Negro.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the civil rights advances for the first 50 years of the 20th century came under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animal laws. So there was a collaboration there. But what happened is I think second and third presidents of the NAACP weren't just FBI agents.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, informants. They were sworn agents.
Right.
And you had this other thing too. See, you had a lot of. I don't want to badmouth gay folk for this, but you had some gays that were compromised at a time where it just did not pay to be revealed as gay.
Right.
And J. Edgar Hoover had knowledge of who was doing what, and they got extorted. Now, speaking of which, J. Edgar Hoover was obviously gay, and there's also another thing now you can hear on the History channels. He also apparently was black.
Right.
Now, if you look at some early pictures of J. Edgar Hoover, he looks like Harold Ford Jr.
He does like a Ford.
This old, jolly, liver-spotted old white man.
Mm-hmm.
And he hated the Klan, which was interesting. He hated the Klan.
Mm-hmm.
And the apparent reason is the Klan used to burn crosses on his parents' property to punish them for passing for whites.
Wow.
So, it is what it is.
What do we need to do as far as for people? Do we need to hold some type of special event in Memphis on the 50th anniversary year of Dr. King's assassination to let the truth finally come out for the public, to really amplify the truth of what happened that day and the things that led up to it and the people and the organizations involved?
Yeah, see, these things they put on national media about documentaries, they are so far from the reality of the thing. It's pathetic. Now, the FBI was out of control. Hoover was a sick man.
Right. He tried to kill Dick Gregory, too. I mean, Dick Gregory got the evidence, the memo and the Chicago Tribune article. They tried to kill him. He was a comedian.
Well, see, everybody on the West Coast, East Coast, Chicago area that was active can give you some stories where the FBI is at least a component in there where they tried to do something to them. Or you are at a meeting discussing what you're going to do to get some black professors in the econ department at your college or university, the FBI would snatch you off the street, 2 weeks later and verbatim quote back to you what you supposedly said. First Amendment pose. You heard of that? Freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Anything illegal with First Amendment, I have no comment. So many a time you got snatched taken 25, 30 miles away from your car. They'd confiscate all your money and you'd have to borrow a quarter, a dime to make a phone call so somebody could come get you and take you back to your car.
Wow.
It was rough.
I had a chance
people died all the time.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Diane Nash. I was doing an interview of Diane Nash, one of the leaders of the SNCC movement, like one of the leaders of that movement, of that era. And then she was talking about how she used to tell the FBI all the time where they was going. Then all of a sudden, when they was going someplace, trouble started. And I said, did y'all ever figure out that it was the FBI that probably was in collusion with certain entities in that area that was causing y'all trouble? And
they'd have agitators. Why don't somebody throw a brick, man?
Right.
Somebody got a Molotov cocktail? Man, why the hell would somebody be here with a bottle of gasoline in their hand?
Right, that's kind of weird.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. But man, a lot of them been compromised, right? Yeah, but I'm saying a lot of people we lost a lot of good people, because I remember just looking at some of the stuff that came out in the church report, Senator Frank Church from Idaho, his church committee findings, when they talking about heart attack guns were being used on people back in the 40s and 50s. I mean, talking about international espionage and some of the abuses at home that the intelligence community inflicted on American citizens.
Well, see, there are some other things, too. Those who were actually active in doing something, quote, militant, unquote,
mm-hmm.
have a reaction against certain things. Like, we don't celebrate Kwanzaa.
Right.
That was a product of an organization known as the US organization, whose saying was everywhere we are, us is. And the person that ran that organization or founded it, Ron Everett, also known as the Maulana Ron Karenga.
Mm-hmm.
He was a sick individual, and he was widely reputed to be a snitch for the FBI and the Special Investigation Section of LAPD. So they are directly responsible for the murders of a lot of people who were activists back when.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't look kindly on that, so we are not going to celebrate one of that entity's creations where he was trying to get national fame. Kwanzaa.
Mm-hmm. But I mean,
Swahili is an interesting language which they tried to focus on. It's a slave language.
Okay.
It's a pidgin language that originated in East Africa. It's composed of equal components of Dutch, Arabic, and Bantu, and it was used on the East African slave trade. Now, I'll give you an example. 1973, there's a guy named Ayuko Babu, who's a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
He still runs the Pan-African Film Festival.
Okay.
So he got it in himself that he wanted to organize something, and he brought a bunch of us together to get equipment for Frelimo, the guerrillas down in Mozambique. So we had managed to get the airliner full of combat boots and other stuff to send down there to them. But the State Department put a stop to that, so it had to be money. So we put on a concert fundraiser down at the Palladium in L.A. on Hollywood Boulevard. So we had Stevie Wonder volunteered, Pharaoh Sanders, Oscar Brown Jr., and Gene Pace and, Taj Mahal and these groups, and they did it for free. Stevie gave a 3-hour-long concert. People weren't coming up out of there, and the owner just asked us to please tell everybody to take the drinks off the table after 2 a.m., and we went literally until the sun rose. Well, meanwhile, Karina and the US organization wanted $5,000 to do this rubber boots dance, and they got told they had to be absolutely crazy and bereft of mind because, if you could get Stevie Wonder doing a free concert, well, not charging us anything, just to raise money, and these clowns wanted $5,000, hey, go rip off somebody else. Let's see, there's a long negative history about those people. So that was a bad thing. Around 65, it really started peaking. They had these so-called riots, which really were uprisings because they had a political purpose. And they vented a lot of frustration and aggression. And the communities came together. The killings in the inner city stopped. The crime stopped. People started getting together, and then the FBI started infiltrating all of these organizations, coordinating with local police departments, so you couldn't trust anybody.
Right.
And then you got Richard Nixon elected. And by the way, a little history, Hillary Clinton was going around the country campaigning for Richard Nixon. And then see what happened is they lost faith in the White House. No more big white daddy up there who would help them out. No more LBJ. So when Tricky Dick got in, Hoover was doing his thing. They started funneling drugs in and some other stuff. There's a lot of things that went wrong, and people started looking at each other out of the corner of their eyes. Can I trust him? No, you can't trust anybody. And people are turning up dead, with great frequency. So They went from high to low. King was just one of the highly visible ones, but that was tenfold down on a lower level, and it wasn't about drugs and stuff like that. It was just somebody had been organized in his neighborhood to get students to be more attentive in school. Schools would have blowouts where the kids would say, well, we aren't getting educated appropriately. We are protesting. This is the kind of thing that was going on. So it was a whole different flavor then than it is now.
Let me ask you this. Is it true that more Panthers were killed by other Panthers than the police?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Here's what the problem was.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there were 3 locales.
Mm-hmm.
L.A., San Francisco, Oakland, and basically Oakland. That's the Bay Area, we called it, and I'm here in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened is that they started. The political thing was cool. It attracted certain types, and people started getting out of the penitentiary who had been former gang members. The gangs had died off right around 65 when those uprisings were occurring and the frustration was getting vented. And like in L.A., you had a situation where you had an old gang known as the Slossons. And a whole lot of the Slossons, when they got out of the penitentiary, became Panthers. You had an old gang known as the Businessmen. They gravitated to the US organization we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They cut deals. And then some of them brought this mentality out where they started, in the name of the revolution, just going back and doing what was at that time being called counter-revolutionary. You don't sell drugs, stuff like this other stuff.
Right.
And you started getting a resurgence of the criminality that had been existing prior to 1965. And a lot of that resulted in people dying. It wasn't police doing the killing.
Mm-hmm.
That was where the killing was coming in, and a lot of the other stuff was just, frankly, the police were protecting the law. Like, for example, at UCLA in 1968, we had recruited some Panthers, John Huggins, Bunchy Carter. Huggins came from back east. Bunchy Carter had done time in the penitentiary and had gone in illiterate, but came out like Malcolm X, being able to write. He did poetry and a lot of other stuff, and he had been a slosser. And then you had two twin brothers that were with us and two other ones, and everybody knew them. So they gunned down John Huggins and Bunchy Carter at high noon on the UCLA campus in front of, 43 witnesses. And to make a long story short, Donnie Cochran represented the two that they caught. They didn't have to do much work to catch them. They were the accessories. They weren't the actual gun.
Okay.
They got convicted of second-degree murder, but within a year, they had escaped, and the escape bulletin was taken off of the wire within 24 hours. I saw them at that function at the Palladium I talked about just a few minutes ago. And ultimately, some 25, 30 years later, they decided to surrender and got told, who are you? Well, we escaped, after being convicted of second-degree murder, we're tired of hiding. Well, we aren't interested. Just keep on doing your thing. Good luck.
Wow.
So, there was that type of stuff. It was so bad that witness after witness said, I know where the guy's mama lives. I know where both of them mama live.
Wow.
They live on such and such street. This is one of them's phone number. Police weren't interested. The detectives said that they thought we were crazy when we were advising them that they were all working together. No, they're not working with us. And then they wound up confiding that, I think they are. We get ready to go bust. And, they get tipped off. And somebody in our departments tell them.
Wow.
So, yeah, there were a lot of murders that went on. There was one farm that we had to convince certain detectives at LAPD to go investigate, and they found 9 or 10 bodies buried on it, just like they were told they would find, but they weren't interested at first. Then nothing came out of it.
Oh, wow.
But see, people were getting killed at all levels. And the justification was that the communists are about to take over. This is the height of the Cold War. We were getting our butts beat in Vietnam, and they were trying to hide that.
Well, actually, I know, Change. I really appreciate you giving us all this history. I mean, it's like a vast warehouse of knowledge over here, and there's so many things to dip into and really consider. I want to get you a take, because I know I talked to you before about this movie, this Get Out movie. And I think you've seen the movie, correct?
I have.
And what's your thoughts about that movie?
I think it is an interesting movie. I think the message is if you let your preconceptions dominate your perspective, you'll miss the point. And you hear a whole lot of people saying it's showing that racism's not dead. But actually, what it's showing is if you say that, particularly if you're white, you're illustrating a point that they're making in the movie. Have you seen it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Remember TSA boy who kept talking about the sexual slave bit that was his fantasy?
Uh-huh.
He couldn't see what was going on because that perspective of his colored everything. Homeboy that was the boyfriend was looking at it as old-time racism. But it wasn't old-time racism. It was something entirely different. It was showing to an extent that what Malcolm learned does have an application. It's not so much the race or the color, it's the culture. Remember, I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen the movie,
Mm-hmm.
but remember what these white folk were trying to become?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you hate something, why would you want to become that?
That's deep.
You see, that's what everybody seems to have missed. Oh, it's this old-time racism. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, you know, and then Grandpa and Grandma.
That was fascinating. Wow. That Jesse
So,
Owens thing really did him in, didn't it? He never could get over Jesse Owens in 36.
yeah, but guess what? You
Mm-hmm.
see, what are you trying to become?
Right.
And if you hate something, why would you try to become what you hate? You see, that opens up a whole different range. Well, it's all this old-time racism. No, it's not.
Mm-mm. You're right.
Something different. And the racism that comes out is people's perspective on what's going on in that movie.
Mm-hmm. It is really deep right there. It is fascinating. It made me think about, David Rockefeller. He died recently at 101 years old, but he had like 8 hearts in one lifetime. He had 7 heart transplants. And I guess I wonder if he saw that movie Get Out before he passed and said, I'm going to do it another way.
Yeah.
That's what I think about when I heard him pass it. He wanted to stay alive a real long time, but maybe he saw that movie and said, I'm going to do it another way.
Yeah. See, it's like that came out of far left field in that movie. I enjoyed the movie.
Okay, you did enjoy it. I know it was kind of different. I didn't know what to expect myself, but it was very, because I saw it late. I saw the late show. It had a 10 o'clock show at the Paradiso on a weekday, and I was amazed how packed it was. It was packed with a lot of black folks in it, and a sprinkling of white people. But I know a lot of white folks were very surprised at what they ended up seeing. They was not expecting that.
Well, yeah, I saw it twice.
You saw it twice? Wow.
Yeah, 3 times, actually.
3 times.
One time, there was hardly anybody in there.
Mm-hmm.
One time, there was mostly black folk, and another time, there were mostly white folk.
How was the experiences? How was those experiences?
The reaction of the audience was different.
Mm-hmm. So what white folks, what they...
I saw a lot of nervous. I heard a lot of nervous laughter in there.
For the white people?
Black folk, it was at certain things, and from white folk, it was at certain things.
Okay, interesting.
And when we are not, I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody that hasn't seen it. But next time we get a chance to talk, so we don't do that, we'll talk about it a little more. But I don't want to ruin the movie.
Okay, that's definitely good. It definitely need to be seen. But you know what's interesting? The guy who created the movie and directed it, Jordan Peele, he's married to a white woman.
Yeah.
And guess where they from? His white girl, his white wife is from Oakland, and her daddy is married to a black woman.
Yep.
That's crazy. So this is interesting. But I wonder whether it's like a cry for help. That's what I kept on thinking when I was thinking about Jordan Peele.
Well, remember what Malcolm said. It wasn't so much the race; it was the outlook.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, black folk ought to consider that in the religion they choose.
Yeah.
What has the religion been doing about race through its existence? Has it been one that's been neutral to race, or has it been one that's exploited race? Wow,
that's deep right there.
See, there isn't but one monotheistic religion that has not exploited race. But that's on the hate list. You practice that when you might get travel banned.
Oh, I got you. I hear you. Wow. Well, Judge, I want to thank you so much, as always, to give us all this food for thought. I mean, people are so like, wow, it's amazing. Like, if you can see the comment section of some of your videos, people are really embracing the message that you're sending out to our people and to humanity in general. And I just want to say, you have any closing thoughts or words you'd like to share?
Thank you. I just say this. Don't rely on the media, traditional media, much. Their vested interest is in entertaining you so they can boost commercial ratings and get commercial advertising. They are not interested in the story other than as a device to get you anxiously running back to see the latest installment.
Thank you, Judge, so
Oh my
much.
God, what's Trump done this time? Oh my God, did you hear about so and so? Oh my, that's irrelevant. You know, they won't even give you an analysis based on objectivity. They just want to have a bunch of dumb bunnies that have their head stuffed so far up their butt ends they couldn't see, let alone hear what's going on around them anyway.
Yes, sir.
So go do your own research. Go look at unorthodox things. Don't always try to think of a conspiracy explaining it. A lot of times stuff just happens because it's human nature. Find out what human nature is. I know somebody that always tells me, why waste time studying history? Well, dumb bunny, if you don't study history, you don't know what you're looking at right now.
Because the past is never past. Like William Faulkner paraphrased him.
Human nature is human nature. There's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
Just see what people have done in the past, and you might recognize what they're doing now.
Well, thank you, Judge, so much for that wisdom and insight. In the words of Great Duke Elton, we love you madly. You keep on producing and pushing.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Good day.
You too.